Hi guys, today I want to talk a bit about Zeus missions and my current rationale behind this, so as to help you guys, the players, but also for any people who may wish to run Zeus missions on their own servers. So I've been doing this for some time now. I'm still learning all the time. Tips and suggestions are always welcome, and I'm always adapting the way in which I practice my control of the AI. I'll probably say several times in this video that it's important to remember that these missions are built for the enjoyment of the player. So all my actions are designed to create a better experience for the players. To me, simply shooting at AI from a long distance, that's not particularly interesting, and you see this on a lot of public co-op servers. Zeus enables you to create fluid missions that play out differently every single time. Even if you've done that same mission before, people may choose different routes, they encounter different situations, timings, it all plays out different. I usually Zeus every Friday night and some Mondays on Ahoy World EU4. This is password protected, and I post the details before we go live. I change it up every time. If you want to join, it's strongly recommended you use the Ahoy World TeamSpeak so that you can work with the other players on the server. I start according to my stream schedule on Twitch, and I start as close as I can to that. I will say just as well, there's one other thing that I use very often with Zeus, and that is of course the Ares mod. Ares is a tool which gives you a load of setup objects and compounds and design stuff like that. It also gives you extra features and control over AI. It's absolutely necessary. Ares, I'll put the link down below. You can download this yourself, check it out. You can check it out in the editor. It's just really critical to the successful running of Zeus missions. Also, the server is limited to 40 players. This is because with any more than that, not only does it potentially lag the server, but it's just too large of a force for me to be able to create effective and interesting Zeus missions. With more players, they just steamroll the AI, and that's not interesting for anybody. Zeus is an ongoing development, so I'm listening to players' feedback and making any adjustments necessary. So don't consider this guide definitive, it's just a helpful overview of Zeus in its current state with me. I'm looking in the next week at changes I can make to the systems and practices of Zeus missions, including available inventory for players, vehicle limitations, and mission design. There are a couple of continuing problems that I do face in running Zeus. There's a contentious line to draw between a player who is playing exceptionally well and a player who is ruining the fun of others. It can be really difficult to judge this sometimes, but what you got to remember is ultimately these missions are built for the enjoyment of everybody. So if one player decides to bring along a powerful piece of kit like a tank and just starts wiping out units with no sense for their own safety and no coordination whatsoever, that's going to be pretty frowned upon. On most Zeus missions, this is not now a problem. Players check what tools are available, they'll ask me, or they'll be just locked off from being accessed to start with. The second problem that goes kind of not with that, but side by side, is stream sniping. Now this is a difficult one because I know that often people playing the mission, they want to watch a little bit, they want to watch some elements of the stream that don't affect the actual mission. They want to see themselves on the stream, they want to see themselves in heli or whatever, the space. It doesn't really relate to what's going on in the mission. The issue with that is that, as we've seen in the past, it's very obvious who is getting information from the stream and those who are not. So far we've been able to easily identify people who stream snipe. It's not an issue. Players who magically locate enemy that they had no possible way of locating, or players who just seem unusually confident about moving around some areas of an objective, things like this. That's a good example. I always give people the benefit of the doubt, but if you're caught stream sniping, the Ahoy staff may ban you from their servers. Don't stream snipe, you spoil the mission for yourself and for everyone else, and it's incredibly obvious because you're just like, oh, why is that person going over there? They have no reason to go over there. Oh look, they have found a unit that they probably had, no reason to. There's other things where like people have no line of sight, but yet they somehow know to go there. It's just like, it's super obvious. Don't do it, it's stupid, you'll get kicked out. So with that out of the way, let's get on with Zeus advice and also my rationalization. So as a player on a Zeus mission, it's important to understand that things are going to play out differently to a standard co-op mission. The Zeus commander will be engaging you and directing AI on the mission. You need to adapt and understand certain principles about how these actions are decided. A Zeus commander should be fair. Although it may not feel like it sometimes, as a Zeus, you want to ensure that the human players have a fair experience. We know how frustrating it is to get killed in Arma, and so I try always to operate missions from a point of reasonable, logical actions. Zeus missions are created for the players playing them, not for the people watching them. So it's always my goal to make a mission that is challenging and enjoyable. And sometimes I have to limit myself. I mean, if you went from just a point of realistic logic, you probably would be able to destroy them a lot more, but you have to kind of balance that back all the time, because otherwise it can be just miserable. I've seen some people saying that the Zeus player is somehow cheating, as they can see all the players and exploit this. That is easily answered and best explained if they understand the perspective of the Zeus. But also, if you feel something that happened was unduly unfair, you can just speak to the Zeus commander after the mission, and then maybe they'll shed some light on the thought process for you. But here are some key points to remember. So as I said, the whole point of a Zeus mission is to create an enjoyable experience for the players. In order for this to happen, you need to have a fair Zeus player, a balanced mission, and also ensure that no one player or squad ruins it for everyone else, as I said earlier. While you want people to have freedom to choose how to play the mission, you need to ensure that the human players are appropriately limited and challenged. Zeus missions take a lot of time to set up. Sometimes it takes me an hour to set up before we play, and people play them to get a more brutal, challenging experience. That's why they come. If you don't want that, just stick to regular co-op missions. If you're going to come to the mission and bitch and moan about like how you got shot or blown up, don't even come. Just go play regular co-op missions. The AI are just basically target practice on those. At the very best, they're like role-play engagement if you just want to chill out and you don't want to think about what you're doing. If one player removes a large amount of units easily and from a great distance to the point it damages how the mission plays out, either the Zeus commander has failed to design a good mission, or that human player is not playing in the spirit of the mission. Let me just give you an illustration about what I mean. Usually, Zeus missions tend to consist of a static base, while then the NATO attack. This is not the only type, but largely it's this or some variation on it. What you want to see is the human players search around, flank, attack, deal with different challenges. Zeus fire support such as mortal fire, it will slow down human players, but it generally won't stop them or damage their overall mission too greatly. By comparison, if a human player brings a mortar to the mission and decides to just start shooting at every target, he could potentially eliminate a large percentage of the enemy without ever facing any threat. Now, as the Zeus, you want to see all the players have an opportunity to move in and engage the mission, not just one unit from afar. Now, in the past, this actually ruined a whole mission after a player and a mortar team, together proceeded to fire into a base without the coordination of their team and basically made the mission irrelevant before anyone else was even near. They also suspected about stream sniping at the time because some of their shots were just landing way too accurately. There was no UAV up, they had no way of knowing. So the next logical question, of course, is, well, Luetin, if players want to use mortars, tanks or heavy weapons like air support, surely they can. You're not just going to say, hey, you can't use that because otherwise it doesn't make the mission work. Well, the answer is yes and no. Most players who come to the missions I provide want a good battle. That's what they're coming for. They don't just want an exercise in how efficiently they can eliminate AI. If you don't have some danger, it's really not that exciting or that interesting. So there's a level of player understanding that's needed to make it fair. Also, most of the time, players will ask, are we allowed to bring XYZ to this mission? My perspective is this. I'm happy for people to bring mortars to missions. I'm happy for people to bring tanks, even an A10. But those units, or A164, whatever, okay. But those units can't just go around lighting up every target they see. They are fire support, the key word, support. They need to coordinate and support the ground infantry, take out dangerous targets that are called in, etc, etc. They also should be prepared that I may also retaliate with air support of my own, because, my guys, they start taking mortar fire, we need to eliminate that threat, we need to call it in, we need to get that taken care of, okay? So that can also happen. Now, Zeus can see all players all the time, but unless I have a reason to attack or move enemy units towards you, I'm not going to do that. Stealth and avoiding enemy is completely an option provided the AI just don't see you. Basically, a good Zeus should not abuse the fact that they can see where all the human players are. You have to put yourself in the mind of the CSAT units on the ground and think, could they reasonably know the NATO players are there? Can they see them? Can another unit see them? And so on. This literally happened this week. I was taking control of some AI units because I was wanting to sort of fight back a little against the human players. I took control of one unit. I was coming around in a small compound of H barriers. The guy was above me on a piece of a building and he started firing down. I managed to get out of the way. I sort of popped out to try and take a shot and he was just waiting. Bam, he just dropped me like that. I immediately, and almost without instinct, just as a gamer, right? Just as a gamer, my gaming instinct was to grab another AI and immediately go back and try and get that guy. And I went to click on the other AI and I was like, wait, no, I can't do that because that other guy has no way of that, that AI unit there has no way of knowing where this other human player is. So I had to stop myself because I was like, rationally, that guy has no bearing against the other, So it's that kind of thing. And it's hard to do. Sometimes it's hard to put yourself in the perspective like that. Because, as I say, if you're used to playing games, if you're used to kind of controlling units and so on, you just kind of like, there's a guy and here's a facility to take that guy out. I must do that now. You have to sort of take a step back and go, no, I have to think about what I'm doing here. And it's hard sometimes. You just instinctively want to do that. Okay, lasers. This is a bit of a random one. It's so specific compared to the kind of general stuff we've been talking about. So it's been happening so much, though, I felt it necessary to mention it. On night missions, lasers mounted on your weapon are useful for pointing out locations to your squad. Usually, you should just simply keep it off and then blink it on and off a couple of times and no more to highlight a position to your squad mates if you're communicating with them. However, I have seen people running around with lasers just permanently on. Now, here's why. In a normal co-op mission, it doesn't really matter greatly. I think the AI do kind of get aware, but overall it doesn't really matter. But in Zeus, it matters a lot, because I will rationalize it. I'll be like, oh, there's the enemy, I can see them easily, and then immediately just saturate that position with fire. So if you see someone in your squad in a Zeus mission running around at night with their laser on their gun permanently on, give them a kick in the head, because chances are they're about to get you all killed. Most Zeus missions are compounds or pre-existing locations, as I said. This means you regularly will face dug-in artillery. Artillery, whilst not fun for units on the ground, is a necessary tool for Zeus. And I think this is something people don't understand, that it's actually necessary. It's not just me wanting to have some fun wrecking the guys on the ground. So why is it necessary? Well, quite simply, AI units are not human. Obviously they're not. And while sometimes their intelligence can be pretty good, sometimes surprisingly good, a lot of the time they are stupid or flat out refuse to even do the most basic actions like move from A to B. So in order for the missions to not be just a straight up target practice session for the human players, the Zeus commander needs to use the tools available to make the mission a challenge for the human players. This means using artillery, paratroops, airstrikes, reinforcements, and sometimes controlling enemy units as well. It's important for the human players to realise that this is why having artillery is often necessary to compensate for the fact that the AI are just generally not very reliable in getting done what you need. With all that said though, I know artillery fire is one of the most contentious things in my Zeus missions. Some players feel it's unfair, some have said using hilltops is important and they feel they can't now. Well, let's get into this a bit more, because I think if people just understood the rationale, it would help them in not all getting killed. And also, I'm continually taking suggestions and working out how best to use fire support so that it boosts my defensibility as a Zeus, but is also fair to the human players. First of all, let's state the obvious. Just stay spread out. You should do this on any mission, but it is more acutely necessary on a Zeus mission. You may find yourself under fire at any time, from heavy weapons, ambushing forces, and bunching up is just going to mean the enemy can quickly and easily eliminate your whole squad. A case in point was the team who didn't check the enemy base toward the end of Operation Open recently, and they nearly all got wiped out by a static HMG. They were just coming up the hilltop, and I was like, oh look, there they all are, and just like cut them all down because they were so close together. Enemy communication. You should always remember that Zeus missions operate on the idea that the enemy are working as a unit. I think a lot of people forget this. On a normal AI co-op mission, the enemy have zero communication. They're just individual squads that are placed, right? So if you kill one squad, all the other enemy units aren't going to react to that. They'll just carry on as if nothing has happened, because there's no communication there. You've just killed one group of AI. Unless the others are nearby, they're just going to ignore that. This is not the case in Zeus. In a Zeus mission, if you engage an enemy squad, the Zeus commander will rationalize that this unit will either radio through the location that they're taking fire from and what they're facing, or when your commander at the base tries to reach that unit on the radio, they won't be able to, and they will assume again that they've been eliminated and maybe go onto alert or something. This means you would then expect incoming reinforcements or fire support from CSAT. It is important to consider this. A good Zeus commander should be fair to the players, as I've said so much. If you have not engaged the enemy and they have not physically seen you, the Zeus commander should not move units or fire at you at all. Eliminating enemy units does not mean you are safe, or that you can stay where you are for any length of time in one position. But again, there's some caveats to that. But if you kill a squad of enemy, the CSAT will consider this unit as having lost radio communication, as I say. At the very least, they may send a vehicle of some kind to find out what's happened and potentially prepare a counterattack. On the other hand, as we saw this week, if you are a sniper team and you manage to get yourselves in a position that rationally I couldn't see, then yeah, I'm not going to be able to react to that. And it's one of the few times it's actually happened this week where we saw it, because usually the snipers or whatever, they're in very obvious positions up on a hilltop and you can kind of see where the fire is coming from, and sometimes it's not that long range. But this week the guys were they weren't on a hilltop, they were on a kind of side of a hill, and they were in trees, they were in bushes, they were all prone, they all had ghillie suits, and I was like, they were firing at about 1,000 meters, and I was like, realistically, my guys on the ground can't see that. They can't see where they're coming from. I had no guys with binoculars to look, and so I was like, there's no way I can put fire support at them. There's no way I can send units that way, because we just can't see them. Hilltops and ridge lines. Now, usually on a co-op mission like Invade and Annex, hilltops are favoured by human players, and for good reason. They provide observation firing positions, and usually the AI will not engage you if you're about, over 500 meters in range. This is not the case in a Zeus mission, and it is important to be aware of this as well. The Zeus commander will likely have pre-designated any hilltops for artillery strikes. If the enemy force has artillery support, or at the least patrolling armor or units, they'll be aware of a hilltop as a potential enemy position. If you wish to use hilltops, it's important to ensure your force is spread out, so that if you do come under artillery fire, you have a better chance of survival, and your medic should certainly stay back. If you do use a hilltop to engage enemy, you should assume that you've been seen and the enemy is preparing to mount some sort of counter operation against you if you start engaging units. Zeus is not just going to allow you to kill all of his forces from a safe distance. Something is going to be coming for you. It's not a co-op mission, it's a Zeus mission. With all that said though, don't feel that you should just avoid hills and ridges. They're an important tool for you to be able to spot targets and engage them as well. Just keep in mind that the CSAT will be watching them and potentially have them pre-ranged as artillery targets. If you only wish to recon targets and say laser designate, you'll be able to do this likely with safety, providing you remain in cover, you're prone, you don't stay, stand up on top of a rock silhouetting yourself. So if you were simply just laying down prone as part of an observation or recon team, you're unlikely to draw attention and are, again, unlikely to get targeted for artillery, even if it's pre-designated, because I have to have a reason to see or know that it's there before I can fire at it. If you do engage from a hilltop, there will always be a small delay between you being targeted by the enemy and then firing. On top of that, you have the travel time of the actual weapons to target. So you could, for example, spot an enemy unit, engage, and then break contact, move away, and be completely safe. So you see, it's not just a case of the Zeus thinking, God damn those pesky players, I must wipe every trace of them from the hilltop. You just have to think of what the CSAT will do to protect their objective and then be aware of it. Engaging at long range in a normal co-op mission is preferred by human players. This is obvious because people want to put the minimum risks themselves, and that of course makes sense. Again, in Zeus, it's a little different. Sometimes by firing at units that are no threat to you currently, you might make the enemy aware of your position and that a force is approaching them. This could then trigger reinforcements or air support to search for you. They will at the least start hunting for any enemy units and fire support and be ready to engage on marked targets. So you may want to just wait with your squad or even team are ready to begin an assault before you then start shooting at enemy vehicles or squads. And again, this was highlighted recently. There were some guys who were far out from a mission, they were sort of 1,000 meter range. They AT'd an Ifrit which was nowhere near them. It wasn't patrolling near them, it wasn't coming towards them, it wasn't likely to target them. They could have flanked around it easily and got more of a jump on the enemy. But instead, they decided to AT it from range. They destroyed it. And immediately, I was like, okay, so my guys are going to see that from like a mile away, and they already had observers watching this location. I was like, well, they're going to see that, they're going to see where that's come from. And what do? We just sent an Orca over there which started airstriking the guys on the ground, and then we were able to mortar them as well. So it's like, don't make yourself a target before you need to. Let's talk a little bit about movement. Now, enemy squads can be set up on any patrol route, and this can be changed at any time by Zeus, so I can get them to patrol in a variety of formations, speeds, and awareness levels. So don't assume that every squad is the same. You might face different strengths of formation or enemy unit. Once engaged, this again might change. They may retreat, they might bring the fight to you, etc, etc. Paratroopers also are something that Zeus has the ability to bring in. Generally, these will be guard infantry, which are not to be underestimated. They're a good unit. A tip also for any Zeus players is to not drop paratroopers directly over human players. You might think, hey, I'm just going to drop these right over the guys, they're going to get on the ground and fight them and take them out because they're really strong. Well, what will actually happen is that generally the human players with automatic weapons will just wipe out the AI squads before they even get on the ground, because floating down slowly with no defense whatsoever is not a good recipe for survival. Enemy armor, if this is sent to locate a NATO force, will search the area and then either remain or return to its base location. So again, don't think that just because you see some armor coming your way, you have to eliminate it. The way it works for me sometimes is that if I suspect that there are players there, if the AI are like, well, we think they're over to the east, or maybe we lose a squad, I might send like a Merid or something to go inspect that. Okay, but I'm not just going to send it straight at the human players. I might send it kind of around that location, and then again, I might sort of rationalize, well, they would search around a little bit, and then if they can't find anything, if there's nobody shooting at them, they'll just come back to base. So again, you might want to wait for a good opportunity to take that out. You might want to let it just return back to base so that the AI might think to themselves, hey, we looked around there was no units, so we don't need to worry so much about that area, and then it maybe enable you to stealth in a little bit more. So you've got to keep thinking about that. That's the way I run the Zeus stuff. It's not literally just a straight case of, hey, I see the human players, I'm going to destroy them. I try to keep the rationalization of, realistically how they behave. Let's talk about controlling AI units. This is where I literally take physical control of a unit. Now again, this can be a bit of a contentious one. Players can nearly always tell when a Zeus is taking live control of a unit because generally they're more aggressive and behave in ways that AI would not, such as being persistent in following another unit. Generally, when controlling AI units, the idea is to be suppressive and slow down the human players rather than just wipe them all out. So if I take control of a tank, I will often use it to scare the players rather than just target them directly, because again, if you wanted to target them directly, it'd be very easy to wipe them all out. If they run into the fire though, that's not on me, because that actually happened recently. I was shooting high explosive shells at guys on a ridge line, and it was designed to kind of hit and scare them, and it definitely was working until one guy decided to jump out from behind a rock as the shell landed and it killed him. It's like bad luck. Ultimately, what I often choose to do is take control of an enemy vehicle and then just control the driver position. This means the decision to engage and fire is still with the AI. It just means I have more control over what that unit is doing and where it's going, because even if I set waypoints, it often doesn't behave exactly how I wanted. So sometimes if I want to just kind of patrol and move around an area, I might take that driver and just drive it around a bit. Taking control of an actual CSAT player is something I tend to do generally in two circumstances. One is a last resort defense, when they've basically won, but I'm trying to make a final assault to make it a little bit more difficult, a little bit more high tension, like having an LMG and just smashing it down onto them at the last minute. In this situation, I'll generally use only what I can see to determine where the enemy are and not map check, because obviously this would reveal to me where people were. Not fun for them, not fun for me. Again, sometimes I will literally target players, sometimes this is just for suppression. I will also use enemy units such as squad leaders who have binoculars or rangefinders and use them to spot targets. If you can see us, then I can see you, and I'm radioing in fire support. Often this is how I will rationalize firing artillery, is that if a CSAT can physically see you, then you should expect him to be reacting to that. So again, if you're sniping units, you got to be careful. If you start sniping and one of those guys has a rangefinder binoculars and I start looking around and I see you, I'm going to call artillery in on that position. Obviously, we don't expect that just because the CSAT are around, they're going to be calling in fire support every single time. It's more that you just need to be aware that if you're spotted, anything could be coming your way. Could be a tank, could be a squad, could be mortar rounds. The last unit to control is statics like the HMG GMGs. Now these obviously carry very, very heavy firepower, so I will again try to restrict how much I fire directly at human players. They also have thermal, okay. Often I will use them in a suppressive way to just remind the players, hey, I can see you, get into cover. If the players are just recklessly in the open though, then I don't mind dropping those guys. You need to remember that on a Zeus mission, your danger threshold goes up dramatically. Okay, let's talk about artillery. Fire support operating is a work in progress right now. I'm refining it all the time, and I will say I really appreciate the guys who have served in mortars or artillery in real life who have been recently contacting me with information and suggestions on how to better improve this feature for Zeus. It's all valuable information. I really appreciate it. So now, when we use artillery, we're generally going to set pre-designated targets of importance in the area, stuff like hilltops, building compounds, road junctions with cover, etc. This does not mean that every single building or hill has been selected. It is down to me how many or which ones are chosen, so don't assume that everything around the area is chosen. However, it seems obviously good positions are preset, and this again was highlighted recently. It was actually hilarious to me that I picked like this one position and I was like, that seems a very likely place that the guys are going to get on. It's a rocky outcrop, they have a good perspective, and what happened? There was like 10 guys on there and they were firing at a squad, and I was just like, that squad's radioing it in, and bam, they just took a full spread right on and killed them all. So if you think like, hey, this is a really good position, chances are the AI have already scouted that and realized it's a good position and set it. Again, doesn't mean you can't use it, but it means if you engage targets, you need to fire, do your engagement and then get off of there as quick as possible. Don't wait, because if you wait there, chances are that fire is going to be raining down. Pre-designated locations mean that the operators do not have to range the target. So as soon as an enemy has spotted that location, they're going to be just firing a full spread down on it, as I say. Ranging targets though, any non-ranged positions, no preset positions, will need to be range checked before firing. So after taking advice from again several real life operators and mortars, there seems to be some variation on how a range can be made. Some say a smoke round is fired out, some say a small live spread. Either way, the general practice seems to be that adjustments are made based off of the first round and then can be adjusted subsequently in increments for fire in that location. So if you see just 1 or 2 rounds land near you, it's highly likely more rounds are incoming and you need to immediately clear that area, running a minimum of like 50 to 100 meters. If it is impossible to move, then just get prone and get behind some piece of hard cover, rock or whatever. There must be reasonable, visible confirmation of a target before fire support can engage, or an enemy unit that has been physically fired upon can suffer no more than 50% losses. Any more than this, and I assume that it's been too damaged or heavily engaged for communications to happen. They're under too much pressure, they've lost their radio operator, whatever. Smoke can also and will be used to blind enemy positions and enable CSAT to advance under fire. Ranging and then saturating an encamped location will provide cover for CSAT forces or to enable a subsequent artillery strike straight afterwards. This was something that was really obvious, but I somehow didn't think about it until it was brought up to me again by a real operator who said that very often the way I was using smoke was wrong. I often would put smoke out in front of the CSAT to kind of give them cover to move forward, and he says no, actually what you would do is you would smoke the actual position of the enemy so that they can't see a thing, and then your guys just move forward. Now that I think about it, that's incredibly obvious, but I didn't think about it previously, so now that's how we'll be doing it. Reinforcements, pretty straightforward, but let's just say Zeus is able to call in a range of reinforcements from ground to air to water-based units. Generally, I now try to place 2 officers in a Zeus mission. These officers are the required clearance to call in reinforcements. If they are killed, then no reinforcements can be authorized. There can be other mitigating circumstances to prevent reinforcements, such as communication towers slowing it down. This will usually be specific to the mission, and again it can just delay, slow down the rate or the time at which those reinforcements arrive. At the start of each mission, the Zeus player should also decide the quantity of reinforcements appropriate to the mission so as to best balance the engagement for the players, and then keep track of how many have been brought in. This should relate to the size and importance of the Zeus mission. That sort of stops you getting carried away, and it also makes you think carefully about at what point you may wish to bring in reinforcements. Maybe you think, well, I'll save them for the end, but then the NATO team take out the officers or they take out the communications, and suddenly you're not able to bring in those reinforcements. So that's a really key thing. Let's talk on some mission elements now. So ambushes. Ambushing is something that I've only just played around with once or twice, but I want to try and throw it in some missions a little bit more. But you should use it reasonably sparsely. If you were to use it too much, I'm sure it would become very irritating. But I think there's a reasonable cause to use an ambush, then it could help the CSAT team greatly. However, this is, I'm sure, again, a little bit of a contentious one for the reasons that I outlined below. Ultimately, what you are left to rely on is that the Zeus player is not abusing their power and the players trust them. I'm always open to further suggestions on how best to implement this. It's important to announce to the players either in the mission brief or just on the server chat that they may face ambushes. No player likes to suddenly just have AI pop up on them, but if they notice a possibility, then they can better guard against it by keeping their spacing well apart and best planning their routes to an objective both in and out. Now again, you might say, well hey, in real life they wouldn't know that, that's the whole point of an ambush. Yes, but you have to remember this is a mission and it's supposed to just be enjoyable for the guys to play. So if they all go in there, they take a long time moving into the base, they have they have to transport in there, and then they walk towards some bushes and get wiped out, that's going to be really fucking annoying. So you have to kind of balance it off against one another. You have to suspend your disbelief, if you will. An ambush is difficult to simulate also in Arma, because human players have a habit to use the thermal optic range finding. So I'm actually looking at editing the current mission on E4 to edit some of those inventories out, so the guys can still use range target finders, but not the thermal aspect to scan the entire region ahead. This would apply to optics as well. Also, there's always the possibility for me of disguised stream sniping, where players magically gravitate towards an ambush area. Just always have to try and be aware of that. Also again, the AI sometimes can give away their own position by firing too early, engaging at an unintended target, a helicopter going overhead or whatever. Setting them to stealth helps to minimise this. The best solution is to decide how many units you wish to have as an ambush, and a general rule of thumb for a large to medium mission could be say 3 to 4 squads, for a smaller mission maybe 1 to 2 squads or even fire teams. Ambushes could be used to guard against an objective, but they should not be placed inside a compound. Realistically, the rationale is that they could be lying in soft cover like long grass, maybe with their own physical camouflage as well to conceal them, maybe pampas the long reedy grass, things like that. They could also be used to intercept a target such as a vehicle or stop a captured objective delivery. Defense missions, this is where the NATO will defend against a CSAT attack. Now until recently we were not really able to do this, it wasn't possible. People were asking for it all the time and I was like, I can't really do this. That's because when the AI make contact or engage, they tend to not be able to make any other action other than just staying in that spot. This means that you could never, for example, lay down smoke and then have the AI advance, because they would just not respond, they wouldn't move. Now recently Bakermop of Hoyworld was able to code the AI for me to ignore this initial combat action, so now I do have the option to spawn AI who will attack and ignore incoming fire. As most people do not have this option, if you want to try a defense mission, there are some alternate options. You can call in a power drop, but the chances of these units doing anything once they land are minimal. You can use mainly armor to attack combined with helicopter reinforcements, but overall again you're just limited as to what they can do, which is really why I rarely did defense missions. With the AI now, though, they behave generally differently and they, it should play out a lot better. Escort and Intercept missions is where you would take a convoy and deliver it to a certain location, or where you may have to secure some tool or weapon to then destroy an enemy convoy. These missions are again difficult to play out in Zeus because of how the AI behave. Their reactions are not the same as humans, and so when under fire they may be easily disabled with limited evasive reactions. The main point with these missions though is that a sole convoy mission with no other element to it is just not that interesting. It doesn't require a huge force to carry it out either, so you need to add in some other aspect before or after the escort and intercept aspect to really make it work. Installation missions. These are a fairly common type of mission, they work very well. This is where the CSAT will have some form of base either spread around an area or located in one compound. It may also have subsidiary artillery or anti-aircraft camps around it as well, so it's a big connection of bases, it's not just one base. These missions overall play out the best to my sort of experience. The CSAT do not have to advance but can patrol around their bases. You can call in reinforcements for them easily. The NATO team have to work through the enemy to reach and destroy various targets held by CSAT. This can be designed any way you want and generally provides various interesting situations. The only problem with these missions is that because the CSAT are generally defending, the NATO team can sometimes use sheer weight of numbers to force through an area quickly, and this takes away from seeing anything particularly interesting happening. This is what you see often on normal co-op missions, where a big ball of players just rushes in, wipes everything out through sheer weight of fire. So you need to keep this in mind when designing a mission. Use artillery, use static weapons, use vehicles to limit how effective a big group of players will be. Split them up, slow them down. Remember also that human players are far more effective in combat and decision making than your AI can ever hope to be. You need to counterbalance that by using fire support and effective mission design. Otherwise your human players are just going to roll in and take the base in minutes. On the other hand, you want to ensure that, as we've said, it's not completely insane, as we discussed, and you've got to be fair to the player. It's important that you do that, because otherwise you're going to end up in an equally negative situation. Fairness and striking that balance between challenge and enjoyment is the key, and it's actually pretty hard to do. Checkpoint missions, we haven't done so many of these. I have done some in the past where CSAT were going to move up to a checkpoint and the NATO teams had to engage them to capture, secure the payload. This at the time worked out really well, so I want to try it again in the future. Another idea with checkpoints is that the NATO team would maybe have multiple checkpoints and they have a mobile strike team to assist should they come under attack, and have the CSAT try to secure and capture the targets. Yet to try that one, but it's a possibility. Region campaign is another style of mission. This one is actually pretty hard to run. It's a lot of work to do, but it worked really good the one time that I did do it. So in the campaign mission, basically what you have is the idea that towns around the map are controlled by CSAT, and they may have a limited force in that region. Okay, so they might only have like 1 or 2 squads actually in the town. The idea is for the NATO team to try and secure those, so that they will roll into the town. They may take it, maybe it's an easy command to take, maybe it's a harder one to take, but whichever one you select as the next one, or whichever one they gravitate towards, you can come up with a whole rationale about how they may have reinforcements there. Maybe and the difficulty is in terms of like actually sort of keeping that balance between sort of fairness and rationale and just making the mission work, because you physically can't place down too many AI units all over the map. I couldn't place down 50 units in every single town and then just expect it to work. So again, we come back to that suspension of disbelief. You may have to place just 1 sentry unit in a town to represent the fact that AI are there. Again, you can rationalize it however you like. The AI are in buildings, whatever. And then when you see the NATO team have decided to come for that location, well then maybe at that point you just throw down a couple of squads, set them up on easy targets, get some units patrolling around, vehicles patrolling around the area, make it have a more of a substantial defense. Again, you've just got to kind of make it work with what you have, and unfortunately you can't have like 100 AI in every town around the map. It's just, you don't have the ability to place that many units. It wouldn't work. It would lag the server too much, so you can't do that. But in this campaign, so let's say you've got like 10 towns all over the map, and the NATO team have to just basically work their way through and capture it. But here's the key thing, is once they've captured a town, the CSAT guys can take it back again. So if they don't leave anybody there to defend or keep as a scout and a guard and radio in when they start coming into fire, you can potentially take that back again. Now again, in terms of the end game, where do you go with this? Well, do they have to take all of those towns back? Potentially you could do it like that, or you just set a time limit that they have to capture X amount of towns in a certain amount of time. So there's loads of different ways that you could work that, but from the ones we've done so far, it played out really well, but it's quite interesting. But the trouble is, it's also very intensive for me, and the way I ran it as well is I even had little mini side missions happening whilst they were trying to do this main stuff. So they had so much going on. The guys were having to split their units all over the place, attack different things at one time, and you might have one attack going on whilst another defend and attack at the same time. It was loads to manage, and me trying to manage all of that at the same time as one person was a really big problem. Hostage or VIP missions. So in these missions, generally what you're going to do is kill or capture or rescue a target. It generally means IDing the target required to complete that mission, but also being cautious with the use of your heavy weapons such as tanks, A164, strikes, etc. I tried running a hostage rescue mission on the public 60-player EU1 server this week. Can you guess what happened? They rolled in with 2 tanks spamming heavy machine guns and killed the hostages. So great work there. On the Zeus server though, we completed this week a long mission where the guys had to secure 2 scientists and then evac them. I used the surrender and release mechanics to enable them to hold and then evac back to base. other hostage missions work in a similar way to this, and it's good to throw in a mission which requires the player to not have to kill everything on sight, as it means they have to be cautious and do more than just destroy everything that's not NATO. So that's my overview of where I am with Zeus. I probably have missed a lot of things, guys, so feel free to point that out in the comments. Probably regret saying that. This whole project is one that I never really imagined would get such a backing from my audience, but you guys clearly love it. I enjoy creating and managing the missions, and the guys playing it love it as well. Also, a massive thanks to Ahoy World, guys. You need to some big thanks to Ahoy World, and go check out the community there, because Ahoy World provide the server for me. They give me admin support. They help to, create some of the facilities that I have there, and they're just endlessly supportive. This is going to be an ongoing project, so as I say, any suggestions or feedback is welcome. Just remember though that there are many limitations on things that I can't control, especially the level of the AI and how they respond. Some people have suggested getting in someone to assist me with the missions so I can handle more things at once. It's a definite possibility, but I personally have, through my time in YouTube and just in gaming in general, found that I hate to have to rely on anyone, as people are notoriously unreliable and they may have a lot of enthusiasm at first, but over time that disappears. So I hate to set up something, have it all working, and then later down the line it falls apart. So for now it's just me, and I'll see what happens with it. Thanks for watching, guys. Zeus operations every Friday, some Mondays. Watch them live, twitch.tv/Luetin.